bright day. It's a new adventure. It's an orange suit. Welcome back. I have missed you guys so much. I've had a lot going on over the last couple of weeks, so things have been a little bit spotty, but it is time to come back to the Orange Suit Guy Show here on the Daily Collegian YouTube channel. I am Kyle Allen, the Orange Suit Guy. I have traded in, but really, not really. I'm at Gallagher Arena. I'm at Boone Pickens Stadium as much as I ever was, but I am no longer in the stands in an orange suit. I am instead covering the games as a journalist. But today and every Friday, I am here with you, sharing my life on camera. And this will actually be the last time this semester where there will be an Oklahoma State football review to be had. It's kind of bittersweet for me. And if you're looking at your calendar and you say, Kyle Allen, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, maybe I don't. I get told that a lot in my line of work. But there's still 2 football games left after this one. And you know what? That's absolutely true. But if you look at the schedule of events next week here on campus at Oklahoma State, it is Thanksgiving break, which means there will be no shows. There will be no shows next week. And the week after that, well, we will have already played our final game against Iowa State. And I do have kind of a season recap in mind, but for the first segment of the show in 2 weeks, we will have a very, very special guest segment, our first ever on the History of the Orange Suit Guy show, and I'm very excited about it. We just got some things confirmed today for a special guest, and hopefully some stuff that you'll like here in 2 weeks coming up on the OSG show. But I did want to kind of mention the 14-6 loss to Kansas State. Not because I feel any obligation to. I mean, there's enough sports happening on campus at Oklahoma State that I could talk about a lot of other things, right, that are frankly more encouraging, that don't involve a losing football team, right? But this loss was heartbreaking for a completely different way, for a different reason. It's one of those things that so often we've looked at one side of the ball or the other and said, man, if we could figure out that side of the ball, we'd be okay. If we could figure out defensively what we're doing, we'd be okay. If we could figure out offensively what we're doing, we could be okay. And that second one was the case this week. I wanted to mention this game at the beginning of the show just to kind of shout out the Oklahoma State Cowboy defensive football players. They certainly played well enough to win this past week at home against Kansas State. The final score was 14-6. You give up 14 points in a football game, you feel probably pretty good about your chances. You probably feel pretty good about where you're at, right, as a team, and your ability to win football games. And unfortunately, these guys have had so much go against them on the defensive side of the ball, from a coaching change in the middle of the season, schematic changes going into that as well, and player defections, players leaving, a lot of those business decisions being made. And that's the nature of the game, right? In 2025, that's the nature of the game. You can like it, you can not like it. That's up to you, but you have to accept that that's the reality of it until somebody decides to step in and make some changes on a legal base. That's what it's going to be. The guys who are out there right now for Oklahoma State defensively are guys that I want to see get a win so badly for their sake. They deserve it, right? Any of the players who have stuck around, who are playing it out with this unit when everything has gone against them, those players absolutely deserve a better record than the 1-9 that is now befallen them, and the reputation of this is a team that can't win a football game. This is a team that just isn't going to compete for anything, isn't going to look good at all. Because in the last couple of games on the offensive side against Kansas, it looked okay. It looked good. It looked better than it had been, certainly. And then this week against Kansas State, you flip that around, flip it on its head, and you've got a really, really good defensive performance, and you've got an offense that puts up 6 points, turns the ball over 5 times, including 3 times in the Kansas State red zone. And, Doug Meacham said it best. You're not going to beat Stillwater High School if you turn the ball over in the red zone 3 times. It's not going to happen. And unfortunately, it's just one thing after another, right, with this team. It's a team that just can't seem to get over the hump. And if it sounds like I'm running out of words to use to describe this team, I kind of am at this point. I kind of am. There's so many adjectives that we came into the season thinking this team could be this good, this team could be this good, this team could be this good. And it just hasn't been there. For one reason or another, it just has not been there. And I don't know what all of the answers are to those questions. If I did, I'd probably be making a lot more money because I would just tell people what the answers are and then they would run with them and then nobody would have any problems anymore. Right? Everything would be hunky-dory. Everything would be great. Again, despite my best efforts in life, I'm not Nostradamus. I haven't figured that out. But I wanted to highlight this game because I don't feel like there's a lot of positivity around the program. And it's hard to have any, right? It's hard to have that positivity when you look at a team that's 1-9, a team that's gotten beaten 69-3 this year. They've gotten beat 49-0 this year. At one point in time, I think all but one opponent, and that was UT Martin, had scored over 35 points against them. You were averaging on the road 3 points a game. You looked completely lifeless defensively offensively, outside of maybe, a trick play here and there, a double halfback reverse pass or a flea flicker or something like that, which, by the way, we tried halfback pass in the red zone, and that was one of those red zone turnovers. So that was a phenomenal thing to experience in the press box of Boone Pickens Stadium, with all of us kind of just looking around at each other saying, how does this team keep inventing ways to shoot themselves in the foot? I don't understand how they keep doing it. And I love the growth that I've seen from this unit, especially on the defensive side. And don't get me wrong, I'm an offensive guy. I love the offensive side of the ball in football. When I'm in my commentary position, I love talking about the offense. Multiple times I've found myself trying to take my headset off when the team's offense for the team that I cover at the high school level has gotten off the field offensively. And I've had to stop myself from taking the headset off and saying, oh yeah, wait, I have to talk about the defensive side of the ball too. It's the side of the ball that I'm drawn to is the offensive side of the ball, but I want to give those defensive players that, again, you have a great scheme in place. You give up 14 points, and really those were 14 points on two, just chunk plays. Two of the few plays that you got beaten on defensively all game long, and that's the difference in the game. And it's really, really hard to stomach that, I think. So we have 2 games left for football, and like I said, this will be the last true recap of what's happening for Cowboy football because of the programming differences that are going to be coming up on the show 2 weeks from now, which will be our final show of the semester. And then we will pick this up again in the spring semester, hitting it even bigger and better than we have in the past. And I am incredibly excited for what that's going to bring. So on the court, it's been crazy in its own right. If you were at Gallagher Arena last night, you saw a basketball game that I don't know how to explain. Track meet basketball games exist. They always happen a couple of times a year. And this was one of those games where at any point it felt like the team that made a defensive stop was going to be the team that won the basketball game. And in some cases, that was actually accurate. The men's basketball team here in Stillwater beating South Florida 103-95. A game that I think coming into it, everybody sort of expected to be the type of game that it was. This is a South Florida team coming in with a brand new head coach in Brian Hodgson, who came over from Arkansas State. And if you saw anything about his play at Arkansas State, you knew that he's a coach who wants to. Steve Lutz said this in his post-game press conference. He wants to score in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock. He's someone who wants to just have these frenetic pace, crazy fast-paced games with a lot of points scored. And it's not really my style of basketball. I like to be a little bit more methodical on the offensive side of the ball. I can't help myself. I grew up watching basketball when Eddie Sutton was the head coach here in Stillwater. When you watch an Eddie Sutton coach team, you appreciate the grittier side of basketball. You appreciate being able to run the clock down, use the entirety of the shot clock, and find your points that way coming off of defensive stops. That's the style of basketball that I know. That's the style of basketball that works for me, but it's not about me, right? I'm not a basketball coach. Certainly not going to be one anytime soon. It felt like a game that when I stepped back, because I'm a writer for this team with pokesreport.com, and I set back to start writing my story in the second half, and I said, I have no idea what I'm writing about tonight. I don't know, other than there were a lot of points. My entire story is points, 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 points. To the point that, well, excuse what I did there, to the point that this was a game that I found out after the fact in the post-game press conference before Coach Lutz came out. Associate Athletic Director Gavin Lang was giving us all superlatives, and he said, this game was 1 point shy. One single point shy of the program record for combined points scored in a game in regulation. That 1 point difference was Central Florida last season, not South Florida. There's something about directional Florida schools in Gallagher-Iba that mean a lot of points. For the women's side, suffering their first loss of the season this past Wednesday night in New York, their first road game of the year, losing to St. John's, a much lower scoring game than we're accustomed to seeing for the Cowgirls. I think through their first 4 or 5 games, they'd score. If it was 5 games, they'd scored 100 points or more in 4 of those games. And the one time that they didn't, they scored in the 90s. And they didn't even hit 60 points against St. John's. St. John's, one of those grittier style of teams. St. John's is a team that likes to slow you down. They like to play methodical possessions on offense, try to tire your defense out in the sense that maybe they just get you to make a mental mistake. Right? They move the ball around a lot and look for a shot. That way, just trusting that your defense is at some point not going to be in the best position, and they're going to stifle you defensively. That's what St. John's is about on the defensive side of the floor as well in women's basketball. And when you're a heavy three-point shooting team the way that Oklahoma State is, the problem is sometimes that doesn't travel well. Sometimes shooting the basketball just doesn't travel well. And it's proven for whatever reason, I don't know what the psychology is behind it, if there is any, that it's harder to shoot the basketball on the road sometimes. I don't know why. Again, I'm not a basketball player. I don't know what the science behind it is or pseudoscience is behind it. But I know that it's difficult. I know that it gives people fits trying to shoot the ball consistently in road games, and that reared its head for Oklahoma State last night. They couldn't get a shot to go down, a lot of frustration, but now they have a chance to bounce back. The men are playing on Saturday at home against Nichols. They have the opportunity, and frankly, something that they absolutely should get accomplished. Nichols has not won a game this year, and that is to be undefeated going into their Thanksgiving showdown with Northwestern in Chicago. And for the women, a chance, Corpus Christi coming to town on Monday night to Gallagher-Iba, and that is a game where Corpus Christi on the men's side has already come to town. Obviously, it was kind of treated as sort of the homecoming for Steve Lutz in reverse, if you will. Steve Lutz was the head coach at Corpus Christi the last time that the Islanders men's basketball team came to Stillwater. So this is still an opportunity for both men's and women's basketball to really keep momentum going. I understand the women are coming off of a loss, but you're back in front of your home crowd on Monday. Yes, it's Thanksgiving break. The student turnout might not be as good as it has been. Whatever. You have to get out there and play. You understand it. You understand the time of year that it is. You can't help the scheduling. Go out and beat Corpus Christi, and everything's fine. Right? So, on a scoring level, you expect it to be back to normal. Scoring and assists is what we're going to get into in our player spotlight. And since 2 weeks ago, we gave the spotlight to the women's basketball team and to Haley Timmer and Lena Girardi, who were both off to incredible starts to the season. We're going to go to the men this time, and we're going to do it because of Wednesday night's game. Wednesday night's game against South Florida saw something that hasn't been done since Cade Cunningham was part of Oklahoma State men's basketball in 2021, and that is a 10-plus assist double-double, which happened for Kanye Clary, who is our player spotlight of the week. Kanye Clary accomplishing this double-double. It felt like anytime Kanye put the ball in the air, the ball was going to hit the basket and be, more points for the Cowboys. Anytime he put the ball on the ground, it found where it was going, and we ended up again with points out of it. Really hard to say enough about the performance that Kanye Clary had for Oklahoma State men's basketball. So I'm giving him the player spotlight. I'm really, really excited to see what this Cowboy basketball team can do as the year goes on. And if you get through this Northwestern game and prove that you can win games outside of Gallagher-Iba Arena, this team might actually be a little bit dangerous. I've been let down enough by Cowboy basketball that I shudder to say things like that and sound like I'm getting my hopes up. But this team could legitimately be a very good basketball team if you get past that next test. Right? You have Bedlam pretty soon after that in Oklahoma City. You get past that maybe even, and you're cruising. Right? This is a team that started to kind of get some notice by the national media, started to get a vote here and there in some different polls. Again, I don't think polls are everything, but I think if you're starting to get those eyeballs on you, you understand that your team is a talented basketball team. And this team still has some things to put together, but I think that this team could be very, very good. And that's going to transition us into a special edition of the archives here on the Orange Suit Guy Show. Because once again, for the second straight year, it blows my mind to have to say that there won't be postseason football to talk about in Stillwater. There won't be a bowl game. There won't be a playoff appearance or anything like that for Oklahoma State football. But what it also means is that we get to go down memory lane and reminisce about another very talented Oklahoma State football team. A team that, frankly, I think only went 6-6 in the regular season, but started something important. And we're going to talk about the first bowl game that I was ever a part of as a fan in person. We talked about the first bowl game that I went to where Mike Gundy was the head coach on our last show. This one even predates that. So stay tuned because we're going to open the archives here on the Orange Suit Guy Show. New camera angle, how about that? Changing some things up here on the show, and it's time to get into the archives. And this game happened when I was 9 years old. This is going as far back into the archives as I could possibly go. We did cover Bedlam 2001 on the very first episode of the Orange Suit Guy Show, and this game technically is a little bit newer than that, but not by much. This was a game that happened in 2002 at a very, very new, at the time, building called Reliance Stadium. That building is now called NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. It is the home of the Houston Texans of the NFL, and which means technically that was the first NFL venue that I visited when I was 9 years old at a brand new NRG Stadium in Houston. This is a game that, regardless of happening when I was 9 years old, I talked about the 2001 Bedlam game and being able to kind of mention some different things that happened right in that game and still recall them from memory the way that all sports fans can kind of do at different points. This is the same one, and that's just because I was there. I can point out very specific moments from this game. This is the 0-2 Houston Bowl, again, late in 2002 against the University of Southern Mississippi. The first time I had ever heard of Southern Miss as a football program. I wasn't quite aware of who Brett Favre was yet, distinguished uh, I was going to say patron, distinguished individual from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Although you have to be careful how you say that now, I guess, with things that have come out in light. But I understand that bowl games in 2025, it's not that they get demonized, they just get ignored. A lot of fan bases and players and media members and things like that are really kind of apathetic to bowl games, especially with the new CFP format and with players that don't take bowl games seriously and opt out of bowl games. And bowl games are not nearly now what they were when I was growing up, but because I grew up when I did, I love bowl games. Bowl games are still something very near and dear to my heart. Bowl games are still something that I watch every chance I get. When it becomes bowl season, it is my time to watch as many bowl games as I can physically stomach. I will sit on my couch all day long and watch bowl games. I don't care. Give me Western Kentucky versus, I was going to say Eastern Illinois. That's not a matchup that can happen, at least not yet. Maybe Eastern Illinois will come up one day. But give me Western Kentucky versus Wake Forest in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I don't care. I'll watch it. Let's go. Because for those players that are on the field, the ones that do decide to play in these games, it does mean something to them. And it certainly meant something to Oklahoma State in 2002. It was the first time in over a decade that Oklahoma State had been to a bowl game. This was the first in a string. There was no bowl game in 2005 in Mike Gundy's first season. And then from 2006 up until 2024, there was a bowl game every single year. This was kind of the team that they say started it all. This team has even been brought back to Boone Pickens Stadium, been brought back to Stillwater to be recognized and to be honored. And that's obviously something that's really, really cool to see, is going back in the history and saying this was a special team. This team beat Southern Miss in the Houston Bowl, and it really kind of changed the culture of what Oklahoma State football was and has been since then, and started the expectation level that we have now in Stillwater. This game kind of made me realize how big college athletes are compared to normal non-athlete people. I sat very close in the stadium to the field. I was only a few rows back in my seat, and at one point it was Tatum Bell, and I've talked about Tatum Bell before on this show, one of the first Oklahoma State players that I really started to idolize, and part of the reason that I started to idolize him was this game. He ran right past me down the sideline on a long run. He broke free and just got down the field on a long, long run. He didn't score on it, but he comes past me, and I remember just being deer in headlights looking at this man and seeing the size. And he was a running back. And Tatum Bell was a good-sized running back, don't get me wrong, but running backs are not the biggest guys on the field. This wasn't a 300-pound defensive lineman running past me. This was a running back, and I looked and said, I don't understand how anybody can tackle that. I don't understand how anybody can make a play against somebody that size. I couldn't fathom just the size of athletes in general, even at the collegiate level. And again, Tatum Bell went on to have a good NFL career as well. So when I'm looking at these different games, something that stands out to me, this was, for all intents and purposes, this was a home game for Oklahoma State. This was a game that there were some Southern Miss fans in attendance, but not in the grand scheme of things. This was a very orange skewed crowd, and was a 33-23 Oklahoma State victory. And I almost now, because of it, and this might be one of the weirder things that anybody hears me say on this show, but it's the honest to God truth, and I mean it. This is the game that kind of gave me this weird draw to USM. I'm not a Southern Miss fan by any stretch, but when I look at college football scores now, I have to look at how Southern Miss is doing, just because they were the first bowl game opponent that I saw Oklahoma State have and got to see, especially in person. And so I've talked before about kind of idolizing players growing up, as you do, right? That's what kids do. You know, if you go out on a playground now and listen to kids argue about their favorite athletes, it's something that has always happened. Frankly, I hear it on a college campus as a sports media major every single day. People talking about this team versus this team, or this player versus this player. Last night at Gallagher-Iba Arena, I had a conversation with full-blown journalists about Michael Jordan or LeBron James. It's something that is just, it's a part of life, right? Is that we become drawn and attached to these different players. And for me, it all started with these early Cowboy teams, with Rashawn Woods, with Josh Fields, with Tatum Bell, and getting to see them, Julius Crosland, getting to see these guys play in person, especially that close, because I might have gone to a game at Lewis Field, maybe, in that 02 season. I don't quite remember. But it was right around that time that I went to my first game at Lewis Field, the building that would become Boone Pickens Stadium. That's kind of my clout chase statement. I get to look at my young classmates who get to enjoy Boone Pickens Stadium for everything that it is, and it's a great stadium, and I love it. And get to look at them and say, you know what? I remember being at games in this building before it was this building. I remember the predecessor. I remember the crumbling shell of a building that was Lewis Field before we were so fortunate to play in Boone Pickens Stadium the way that we are now. And this 02 team, like I said, it started a new level of expectation for Cowboy athletics and for Cowboy football in general. Cowboy basketball was already on top of the world. And for this 02 team, it's still, when I talk about myself as a fan, and I date it back to 2001, 2001 is the true number, but 2002 really was when it was solidified for me. And so being able to be in Houston for this bowl game was a huge deal to me. When I found out that we were going to spend the last week of the year basically in Houston, Texas, getting ready for a bowl game against a team I'd never heard of, and then I get inside this NFL stadium that's only a couple of years old and see a crowd that's 75-80% orange, it was game over. For any other fan base that wanted to have me, they couldn't have me. At that moment, I truly became orange, and we are probably just a couple of weeks away now. I imagine as soon as the last game of the season against Iowa State is done and the team is off the field, I imagine that within a couple of days there will be an announcement on who the next head coach of Cowboy football will be. I think it's down to a couple of players. We're not going to speculate on that here. But all I hope is that maybe it's next year that the very, very young Oklahoma State fans among us have the 2026 season to look back on like I have the 02 season. And that is the season that, regardless of how long the next head coach is here, regardless of what he accomplishes, we can get back to saying this is the team that was special. This is the team that righted the ship from a cultural perspective within Oklahoma State football and got us back to where we need to be as a program. So, just a little bit of sentiment as we go forward, and it's not going to be the last time. This is the holiday season. It's a sentimental time for everybody, and we're going to go into um, a record in Orange Jams in our next segment that came out this year, but has been in the works a lot longer than that, and just kind of something that is a little bit off the wall for me. It's definitely still in the heavy music world in general as an umbrella, but a little bit different. So stay tuned. I'm very excited to get into the new release and into the classic release. It's Orange Jams next on the Orange Suit Guy Show. OSG Show, where I tune you into a new release within the rock and metal world that I really, really like, and then also shine a light on an old school record that shaped me as a fan of everything that there is to have heavy music wise. This one is groundbreaking for the show because I believe for the first time in the new release segment, I think we got 4 episodes in, but it is time for a technically American band to be featured on the new release segment. I say technically American. They are Boston's greatest export since the American Revolution. They take a lot of inspiration from Ireland. They are very, very Irish in their heritage and in their sound and in their roots. Surely you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Dropkick Murphys. And this past week, they finally did it. They finally gave us a new record to follow up on a really interesting chapter of their career that came just a couple of years ago when they released 2 different acoustic records, at least one of which that was recorded in the state of Oklahoma for Okima Rising, and then their acoustic record, This Machine, or This Guitar, one of those 2, Still Kills Fascists. If you know that, that's a reference to Woody Guthrie, because that record was made up almost entirely of unfinished lyrics from Woody Guthrie, songs that he never finished or recorded before his death. A really, really cool kind of detour from the punk sound that they have been known for and famous for, but they're back to it with this one. This is their album For the People that we're going to talk about, coming out on Dummy Luck Music. The 13th record for Dropkick Murphys, and that feels unbelievable to say, just because that means that I have been listening to Dropkick Murphys for the majority of my life, and that's absolutely true. I was introduced to the music of Dropkick Murphys when I was just barely in high school. We were in marching band. If you know anything about marching band kids, we kind of tend to have a really eclectic taste in music, kind of all over the place with everything that we like. And one of my high school marching band buddies played a song for me from a Dropkick Murphys record, and it was a song off of the record The Warrior's Code. I don't remember which song it was now, because I immediately went home and just dove as deep as I could, finding anything and everything that was Dropkick Murphys. Obviously, they're known, I'm Shipping Up to Boston gets played at just about every sporting event in the world. They have a lot of other very popular songs. They have a version of Johnny I Hardly Knew Ya that was a very successful song for them. A song called The State of Massachusetts, which is a very successful song for them. And while some of the mainstream shine has gone away, the last real big mainstream song I think that they had was a song called The Boys Are Back. Maybe a song called Rose Tattoo, but those are great songs. But Dropkick Murphys has just kept on doing what they do. They've never worried about it. Like I said, they took the little detour to do Okima Rising and to do the Woody Guthrie project and do acoustic records. Al Barr, their longtime vocalist, has stepped away from the band, has not left the band. They've been very specific about that. He has some family things. I think he's caring for some family members who are have been in poor health and things like that, and so he's stepped away to prioritize that. Is still very close to the band. He actually shows up on this record for the people, lending his voice to one of the songs on it. So really, really good to hear Al Barr back doing vocals with Dropkick Murphys. And I don't talk about my political stance because, frankly, I like having friends. Let's be honest about it. I like having friends, and if you become too political of a person, a lot of times you end up sacrificing friendships. Punk music is inherently very political, and Dropkick Murphys has not shied away from their political viewpoints. Their political viewpoints are very apparent in some of these songs. Agree with them or disagree with them on a political stance, who cares? These are very good tracks. They are very good punk rock tracks. They are very good Celtic punk rock tracks. And in a lot of ways, I think that regardless of if you agree with the messaging or not, they're well written. These are very, very good songs. I'm going to highlight the first two tracks off of this record, which is a song called Who Will Stand For Us and a song called Long Shot. These are kind of the more political songs on the record, but also two of the more energetic songs on the record, and that's why I'm highlighting them. It's less of a political statement and more of an energy statement. When I listen to Dropkick Murphys, what I'm listening to Dropkick Murphys for is energy. What I want with Dropkick Murphys is just something that I can get a little bit fired up to. It's punk rock, man. It's high energy. It's all about it, right? And these songs do a very good job of delivering that, as Dropkick Murphys has throughout the entirety of their career. But this album is very special. This song also gets really into some sentimental issues. I said that this is kind of a sentimental episode for me, just as we wind down our semester and as we wind down another year, as 2025 gets ready to come to a close, and has been such a special year for me on a personal level. But something that gets looked over, especially in the world of punk rock, and as someone who's played in punk bands, has been around punk bands for long periods of time, you know, the loudness, the excitement, the political nature of it, those things get highlighted. What gets forgotten about a lot of times in punk rock is the sentimental messaging of love your people. Love the people who are in your life, who make your life better. And for the people, for the band, for Dropkick Murphys, doing my research on this record, for the people sounds like a political statement, and it is. But it also is for the people. It's for their people. It's for the people who they love, who have shaped them, and who have made impacts on their life. And I'm always going to have a special place for that, because for me as a songwriter, those are always kind of the most fun but also most challenging songs to write. You know, I can come up with things I want to write about, and I can make up things I want to write about, but to truly be able to try to do somebody justice with a song, especially in the punk rock world, it takes a special kind of artist to be able to pull that off. And there are so many different people that get highlighted in this record. There's a song on this record called Chesterfields and Aftershave. I'm looking at my notes so that I don't leave any of these tracks out, because these are great tracks. Right, Chesterfields and Aftershave, written about Ken Casey's grandfather, Ken Casey, the other co-vocalist of Dropkick Murphys. This is kind of a tribute to his late grandfather. Streetlights, another tribute to his late dad as well. I mean, and just both incredibly well-written tracks. I'm someone who, I don't consider myself to be an overly emotional person sometimes. I certainly have my moments, but I was walking down Washington Street here in Stillwater. I had just gone to get some lunch, and I was coming back to campus and was listening through the album on my first listen through, and especially the second half of Chesterfields and Aftershave, I really had to I had to get rid of some allergies that miraculously hit me halfway down the block of Washington Street. And um, Al Barr coming in for Vulture Circle High. Again, like, it's a somber sounding song, but it's a song that the band just feels whole again with Al back in the fold. And this album has really continued to stick with me since I listened to it for this show. I would have listened to it at some point anyway because I love the band and I love what the band is about. But this is a message that, especially this time of year, we really, really need to focus on and we need to take seriously. So, we're going to do something that we've never done before on the show, and I don't know that we will again, but I'm going to fade the screen to black for just a second because I want you, if you're watching this show, to think of someone that you care about, that means something to you, that you're thankful for. And maybe you reach out to them, maybe you don't. Maybe there's someone you talk to every single day. I don't know. But I'm going to give you an opportunity to really take the message of For the People to heart. And then when we come back, we'll get into the throwback record, which is going to be a complete left turn. So be ready for that. But tell somebody that you love them today. We'll be back in just a second. So with that, we're back and we are going to go into the throwback section of the week, the throwback record, and this one I am very excited for. I know I say that a lot on this show, but this is me sharing my life, right? This is me putting myself out there and saying, this is who I am. I'm more than some guy in an orange blazer. I have things that I want to talk about. And for those of you who don't know, I've been a musician for most of my life. I'm a bass player. I'm a singer. I do a lot of things in a lot of different avenues. Everything from deathcore music to musical theater. I've covered the entire gamut of things in my life. And when I think about who made me want to sing, who made me want to be the person on stage with the microphone, it all comes back to a man named Ronnie James Dio. And I've been holding on to this one for a little bit, but I couldn't think of a better time to break it out. This is Ronnie James Dio's Holy Diver from 1982 on Reprise Records. This was Dio's first solo record, first record under the name Dio, with just the band Dio. Ronnie had been in several bands up to this point. If you know his career, it all started in the 1970s, at least in the rock music world, with a band called Elf, moved on to a band called Rainbow, and then most famously was the vocalist chosen to lead Black Sabbath after the band moved on from Ozzy Osbourne. And this might upset some people, right? I'm prepared to deal with that and face the consequences of my words. I love Ozzy's Black Sabbath. Ozzy's Black Sabbath are pioneers in the heavy music world. There are a lot of Dio era, Heaven and Hell era Black Sabbath songs that I think might be better than a lot of the Ozzy era Black Sabbath songs. But this is his time now. Post Black Sabbath, Dio has become its own band, and Holy Diver breaks onto the scene. And this record in general kind of started my love for the thing that is now called power metal. I would never consider Dio a power metal band, but he was, like, Dio as a band and Ronnie as a vocalist and a musician are probably kind of the progenitors of power metal, at least in America, because Ronnie had always said that he was a big fan of different folklore. He was a big fan of reading a bunch of different stories that all these different lores and mythoses and things behind it. And because of it, he wrote a lot of music around those themes. He wrote a lot of music revolving around a lot of these fantastical worlds and fantastical creatures and things like that. And this record is full of that. And that's power metal's specialty, right? We invent worlds, we come up with these big fantastical narratives and creatures and characters, and we put a heavy soundtrack behind them, and it's power metal. It's this thing that we've branded power metal. And I think it kind of started in America with Ronnie and with Dio. And it's really funny to me because I used to watch hours of music videos. I would come home from school, get done with whatever I had to do on that particular day, and I loved turning on a channel that unfortunately no longer exists. That at the time was called VH1 Classic, and VH1 Classic's calling card was just 24-hour music videos. All it played was music videos, and it was broken up into these little segments, these shows, if you will. But you're showing music videos, so it's not really a show. But every hour or hour and a half or 2 hours would be themed. So you'd have 80s pop music videos, you'd have grunge music videos, you'd have classic metal music videos with things like Iron Maiden and stuff like that. Kind of those Headbangers Ball type of music videos. And the music video for Holy Diver, the song, played all the time. And if you go back and watch the music video now, it looks kind of cheeseball. It's from the early 80s. The special effects are not great, right? And Holy Diver as a concept is weird. What does that mean? And the video doesn't really explain it, but the video, it does at least tell a little bit of a story, sets the scene for kind of this grand world, if you will, with these characters. And the iconic guitar riff that starts the song, it's not a difficult riff, but for my money, as much as I love technical guitar, as much as I love crazy acrobatics on the guitar, my true measure of success is, can you take simple guitar riffs and make them work and make them into something really, really powerful? And the Holy Diver guitar riff can do that and does do that. Vivian Campbell, who played guitar on the first couple of Dio records, later was a member of Def Leppard, I believe still tours with Def Leppard, is an incredible guitar player on this record. And that riff, it stuck with me. I heard it, and I heard Ronnie's incredibly powerful voice on this track, and watching this weird music video, and I loved it, right? And it stuck with me. In the metal community, a lot of us wear a patch vest with different band insignia or whatever on it. And for all of us, the most important thing is kind of that centerpiece on the back. What is the big thing on the back that is the number one thing that we want people to know that we're a fan of? And for me, I have a giant Dio logo on my vest that I wear to shows, and it's led to some incredible conversations with people who are older than me in the metal community who love his role in creating metal music and pioneering metal music. This album cover, it also features the character Murray. Murray became Dio's mascot for essentially forever. I mean, Murray is still used in a lot of insignia and memorabilia and things for Dio. And because this is the early 1980s, there's a lot of what we call satanic panic around it. Dio was absolutely blasted for this album artwork because it looks like this giant demon creature that Murray was, holding a chain or a whip, and he's like attacking a priest with it. It's all just whatever. It's really cool art. It actually took me years to realize that the person in the scene has a priest's kind of habit on. I didn't even realize it for years after that. There's nothing satanic about the record. It's all about just this crazy mythos and things like that. And coming into putting some tracks to highlight on this, I put the song Holy Diver in there. I put my favorite Dio track of all time, a song called Rainbow in the Dark, on this record as well. And those are probably two of the most famous, if not the two most famous songs off of this record. There are so many good tracks that I could have included that I just didn't. And some of those, songs like Straight Through the Heart, Stand Up and Shout, Don't Talk to Strangers, another absolute classic Dio song. This whole record is one that I'm going to add it very soon to my vinyl collection to get kind of the retro feel for the record. And I can't get enough of it. If you have any love at all for old school, powerful metal songwriting that's not over the top heavy, it's not some kind of crazy, there's no harsh style vocals in it. I know that turns off a lot of people to the metal music world. It's nothing like that. It's Ronnie delivering a fantastic vocal performance. Give Holy Diver a spin and thank me later. I do accept thank yous in all varieties of however you choose to deliver those. But Ronnie, the man who inspired me in the world of music, highlighting his record on this show, The Least I Can Do. So Ronnie James Dio gets the throwback of this, and Ronnie liked to sing about lore and folk tales and things like that. And with that in mind, I picked a movie for our horror corner segment that revolves around that. It revolves around mythology like you wouldn't believe, and it melds a lot of things together into one big concoction. And as usual, I'll kind of give my thoughts about it and in the show after that. So stay tuned for Horror Corner here on the Orange Suit Guy Show. Horror Corner here on OSG Show, and again, I chose this week to revisit a movie instead of watching a new movie. It's just been another crazy couple of weeks for a lot of things going on in my life, and knew that I was going to be covering a lot of folklore and things like that with the Ronnie James Dio segment. So instead, I went back to 2017 to find a very supernatural type of horror movie to cover on Horror Corner, and it has a lot of ties in theme and inspiration to 2 weeks ago's movie, and because of that, again, I have some really, really, really mixed feelings about this movie, but it's going to come out here anyway. So this week's movie is 2017's The Ritual, brought to you by David Bruckner. And when I did some research on David Bruckner, I am excited to maybe watch some more of his work. I think that a lot of the ideas that he had for The Ritual work out really, really well. I think the movie is shot really well. A lot of the effects that he went for in his cinematography, I think he nailed. So, and we'll get into the biggest thing with this movie in just a minute. David Bruckner, I do think, is a good filmmaker, so I am excited to potentially give him some more of my attention in watching these movies later on. This movie itself is adapted from a novel, and it's a novel that I have not read, and when Bruckner was talking about the role that the novel played in what ended up being his adaptation of the film, a lot of what he was talking about was the monster creature in itself and what turned into the monster's appearance in The Ritual, because it's kind of this weird blending of mythologies that happens in the book and in a roundabout way, I guess, happens in the movie. And that's actually kind of one of my issues with the movie, is that some things are not quite explained maybe the way that I would like them to be. But the monster of this movie is a monster named Motor. Motor is a Jotun. I believe I said that right. I think that's how they say it in the movie. Jotun comes from Scandinavian origin. It comes from Norse mythology. I don't follow Norse mythology. I'm not Scandinavian. I don't speak Swedish or Norwegian or Danish or any of these languages that come from Scandinavia, so I could be saying it wrong. The whole issue that I have with Motor the Yotun is that a lot of what, and I've kind of gone back and forth on this, but a lot of what you find out and what I know now about the creature, I had to do independent study on. A lot of his methodology, his motivation, what exactly he is or where he comes from, a lot of it is not really explained well in the movie. The movie says the word Jotun, one of the bastard sons of Loki, which is mythologically accurate, but that's about the only explanation you're given for who or what this creature is and who these followers are that you run into late in the movie. The whole rest of it is independent research, which on a level I kind of understand. I if I were to follow some deity, right, and I say that I am a very openly religious person, but if I were to follow maybe a lesser known deity, and I had a very small group of people who followed this deity with me, and somebody stumbled across us and said, "What is this thing?" What, especially if it's a deity that's chasing them through the woods and has killed some of their friends. Hey, who is this thing? What is this thing? And I say, "Oh, it's a Yotun. He's one of the Yotun, and we don't say his name." And then that's it. And I don't tell you anything else. I could see that being how that conversation goes, how that interaction goes, and not say, "Oh, let me sit down and tell you everything you need to know about who this guy is and what he is and what he does." Right? So I understand not wanting to shoehorn in an explanation of who Motor is, or why you don't say his name, or what Jotun means outside of bastard sons of Loki, how you get into any of this, right? It would really, I think, bog down the movie to do that. I don't know if the book does a better job of accomplishing that, but it always kind of annoys me when I have to go back and do the extent of external research as I had to do to figure out exactly what this thing was, because he's not really explained fully outside of some runes and a big shrine, and then you do see him for an extended period of time on screen. And I will say he looks fantastic. This is a very good movie monster, some really iconic shots that they used in promotion for this creature. And ultimately what this movie boils down to for me is that I understand if a friend of yours dies and the whole story revolves around four friends who are going on a hiking trip to remember their buddy who was killed in a robbery in a liquor store, senselessly and needlessly killed. And this guy loved hiking, and so you want to go hike a trail that he wanted to hike in his honor. Right? In a way, I get that. If that's something that is a proper way to pay homage and pay respects to your friend and to help you grieve and deal with your friend being gone, I get it on that base level. However, this also felt really excessive because they kind of accomplish the hike before they ever go. They kind of, they're able to get there to this peak where they've built this memorial for their friend. For me, that's good enough. Like, we went up here and we have this memorial set up for Robert, and it's on top of this cliff, and you can see out into this vast forest. Let's go home. Let's be done with it. Right? We've accomplished this memorial for Rob. That's all we need. So I don't get going further into the forest. Obviously, they explain it, right? This isn't just a spur of the moment thing for them, right? They are on a legitimate hiking trip. But we talked about, when I reviewed the movie Sinister, that I have a basic philosophy in horror movies that says children are always evil in movies. Another basic philosophy that I have is You can't die in the woods if you never go in the woods. Stay out of the woods, and you will keep all appendages and your head attached to your body, most likely. Stay away. There's a reason I don't go camping, all right? I am at a natural disadvantage with whatever exists out in the trees that I am not equipped to deal with, right? Don't go in the forest, and bad things don't happen to you, right? And then on a related note to that, all of this really gets started because your buddy says he has a shortcut. If you are in the woods, and none of these guys are really that experienced with hiking, if you're in the woods and your buddy says he has a shortcut, no, he does not. Stay on the path. Don't die in the woods because you have a shortcut. It does not go well. When that shortcut leads to you coming across a bear impaled on tree branches, gutted all the way down, he really doesn't have a shortcut. You turn it around, spin it 180, and get up out of there because nothing good is going to happen for you. It's not meant to be. Get out of there, go away. So it's hard for me to have a whole lot of sympathy for these guys for getting killed in the woods when really they just should not have gone in the woods and stayed out of there. Right? It was a unique blend of some ancient kind of Anglo mythology and Scandinavian mythology to come up with Moder, the Jotun. I don't want to bog down the show with a lot of that, but this is a really unique type of deity in the world of mythology to try to incorporate. This is one that doesn't get used a lot. And so I thought this was a really cool idea. And it's one of those that, like, when you come across this cult in the woods, and I thought that maybe they would explain it as, like, this is some ancient civilization, or these are primitive people who don't speak English. No, they speak just fine English. These are modern people that just now live in the woods and worship this evil god that hangs people from the trees as sacrifices. Like, there's a lot there that's just, again, it's kind of not really explained. They come into a house, they find the shrine, they have these nightmares, and they run away. Luke is branded with a rune because he's the one dealing with the most grief out of this group, and grief is what Moder feeds on and marks these people who have suffered great trauma and great pain in their lives, and that's what ultimately gives him his power. And when the cult shows up at the end for the last act of the show, by this point, right, two guys are already dead. Luke and Dom are still alive. Dom is the only voice of reason throughout the entire thing. He's the one who's always trying to get everybody to just go away and back out, and it's not worth it, right? I was waiting for Dom to die. I was always shocked at how long Dom survives in the grand scheme of things, especially because he seemed like the one who, because of the nightmare that he was given in the house where Moder communicates with them, he knew what his fate was. He knew he was a dead man. He knew that this was going to happen to him. He knew there was no shot. And he's the one that tells Luke, burn it to the ground and survive and get out. And, you know, I understand the sentiment, and I understand Luke's reaction of, no, I can't let you die, because he's already, the overarching, if I back up for a second, the overarching grief that Luke is feeling is that he's the reason that Robert died in the liquor store, because they were together when the robbery happened. Luke hid behind a shelf, and Robert starts to be, have his belongings taken from him, and Luke is holding a bottle in his hand to use it as a weapon, and then he freezes, and he doesn't move, and he watches Robert get beaten to death with a pipe right in front of him, and doesn't move, doesn't go anywhere, is stricken with guilt that had he acted differently, the outcome could have been different, and maybe Robert is still alive. And that grief and that guilt never gets dealt with. It is such, and I don't mind bitter endings to movies, but I don't know that this one was kind of played like it was going to be a happy ending. There's no way, because one, I want to talk about Luke's justifiable stupidity here, because Luke, again, I mentioned that this cult are modern people, and they have a shotgun in their house for whatever reason. Luke takes it. You know, he takes care of a couple of cult members to get on the road, get it back out onto the trail, and start running. And actually, this is kind of a hilarious sequence with some of the punching of people in the face that kind of made me chuckle a little bit, at least. Why, when you find yourself looking straight at a giant deity, Jotun are giants. They're primordial giants that are made up of a bunch of different types of creature. And this thing, when it stands all the way up, is probably 4 times taller than you. Why do you shoot it? Why do you take your shotgun and shoot the god? You think you're going to beat a god with a shotgun? Why? I understand that's what you have at your disposal and you're trying to defend yourself and you're trying to get out of there. It's a primordial god. You think it can't stand up to gunshot? And by the way, when he shoots the god, when he shoots the Jotun has just killed one of its followers, gouged out her eyes, and has killed her. And she's the one who says, this is a Jotun, we don't say his name, we fear him and we worship him. Her lethal sin was that all of these people fall on their face in reverence when Motor shows up. She looked up at him and was killed. That doesn't feel like a great deity move to me. Like, I understand I'm a god, like, I can do what I want, and if you don't do what I like, I'll kill you. Fine, I understand. But this thing has been devoted to you, and you've marked it as one of your followers. So whatever this person has experienced has been deeply traumatic, and you've forced this person into worship of you to get rid of that grief. And it looks at you and you say, okay, to the impalement on the tree for you. Maybe it may be a little excessive for Motor. Maybe get the ego in check a little bit for a primordial giant. I get it. Back to the shotgun. Why are you shooting a literal god? Second issue I have with this ending sequence is Luke does exactly what Dom tells him to do. He gets a torch, he starts lighting everything on fire, and he gets out and he books it, and he starts running through the trees, and this cult's house just goes up in flames. And of course, Motor is upset about this and goes taking off after Luke through the woods. It's never really established if any of those cult members survive. And if they don't survive, what happens to Motor? Like, how much of Motor's life force revolves around worshippers? Because if they're all gone and Motor is then rendered powerless, why would he not try to stop that? If the worshippers don't matter, why does he need them? So there's a few little bigger picture issues, but I would have liked to have known if any of those cult members ended up surviving this fire that was started as he's running away. And Luke escapes the forest, right? He gets out of the forest. Motor can only go as far as the tree line, apparently. Apparently there's invisible walls, PS1 video game style, for primordial giants, and he can't cross out of the forest. He can just yell, and they spend a chunk of time just screaming back and forth at each other before Motor slinks back into the tree line. And then the movie just kind of ends with Luke walking away from the forest. Nothing is ever resolved. Because Dom's last message to Luke is essentially, tell my wife that I loved her and get out of here and survive. That's sort of his last in so many words, his last message. Luke now still has the grief that he feels and the guilt that he feels about Robert's death that set all this in motion. Now he has to go to his buddy Dom's wife and say, hey, Gail, Dom is dead. Our other two friends are dead. I have this scar now in the shape of a rune. And guess what? There's no happy ending for Luke. Luke now still has everything that he had. He has more dead friends, and he has a physical scar. So it's a movie that kind of almost feels incomplete. There's no real follow-up to what happens after he leaves the forest. Now, do I think there's enough material there to build a sequel or something off of? No, I don't. And to my knowledge, they never have. But it's a movie that when it ends, I kind of went, wait, but what happens? You know, he gets out of the forest, that's fine. He escapes Motor, that's fine. And as he's leaving the forest, I'm thinking, okay, let's cut back to something. You know, let's cut back to, does he go back to the memorial for Robert on the mountain? Does he go to Gale? Like, what does he do? And instead it rolls credits. And so for me, that hurt my opinion of the movie, just because I would have liked some kind of more resolution about it, whatever that resolution is. Because as it sits, like, it's just, okay, now this guy's life sucks even more now, because now he's got 3 fewer friends than he started this whole thing with, and he has to be the messenger. He's the only one who gets out of the woods. And so I'm not totally thrilled with this movie. I had similar thoughts to it the first time I watched it back in 2017. So this is a solid 5.5 out of 10 movie for me. It's done really well, and if you like some of the visuals, I would definitely recommend going and seeing it. And a lot of the story is good, but there are the problems with it. I hope that the source material, the novel, kind of gives more information on what happens to Luke after he leaves the forest, but you don't get any of that in the movie. So maybe go see this one, maybe skip this one, you're not missing a whole lot, but you do get to see a very cool adaptation of Motor the Yotun in a visual form that's very, very good. So I will recommend it on that by itself. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you have more records to listen to. If you haven't listened to Dropkick Murphys for the People, certainly if you haven't listened to Holy Diver by Dio, go listen to that. Go check out The Ritual from 2017. Most importantly, tell somebody that you care about them today, because that's the most important thing. And above all else, I hope that you had a good time. I always have a good time doing these. I love doing these. We'll come back in 2 weeks for our last show of the semester. And if there's one thing to remember, as always, it's that life is always better in an orange suit. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, guys.